We all want the same thing, obviously, on both sides, and that is to make sure that our children are as safe as they can possibly be when they're in school. How do we do that, and does it involve new regulations for guns?
Well, I think the most important thing we can do is when we look at all these mass murders and attempted mass murders that have happened recently and over past decades, is one of the things that ties so many of them together is mental illness. The vast majority of the perpetrators are young males, late teens, early or mid-20s, who we see, at least afterwards, were suffering from schizophrenia or some other very serious mental disturbance. And one of the, I think, mistakes we've made as a country over the last 50 years is, even though the size of government at all levels is just bloated, funding for mental health, for institutionalization of these kinds of dangerously, violently mentally ill people, and the treatment for them has been slashed. You know, part of the reason for that is that the mental health lobby of the providers is a rather weak lobby compared to, say, the prison guard lobby. So I think one thing that I'd hope almost everybody could agree on is that we need stronger laws on civil commitment for the violently mentally ill, and much more funding for treatment.
I need to get a clear view of what proponents of Second Amendment rights, the viewpoint on assault weapons, because one thing that always comes back is that if there's never, I mean, it's awful to say, but if you don't have to take, if there's no break in when someone has to reload, it's impossible to stop this kind of thing. And I mean, you're not allowed to buy a hand grenade. Right? I mean, or an RPG or something like that. Who is it? Why does a normal citizen need the ability to have a magazine with all these bullets and to be able to reload instantly?
Well, the so-called assault weapon issue, which got thought up by the gun prohibition lobby back in 1987, has always been a phony issue. It's based on the cosmetics of how guns look rather than on their function. The guns that the prohibitionists want to outlaw are guns that function just like every other normal gun. If you press the trigger once, one bullet comes out, just like all other ordinary guns. In fact, Connecticut is one of the minority of states that has a ban on these so-called assault weapons that was enacted in 1993. So none of the guns used in this horrific murders were assault weapons by Connecticut's definition, by the laws that the gun ban lobbies wrote. And I think that's an illustration that you don't do anything constructive for public safety when you go around banning guns based on cosmetics rather than on function.
But David, let's talk about function.
Let's let Governor Dean is ready now. So Governor Dean, how do your lips were moving, I don't know if we heard you, but you were able to hear David, right?
Sure. You can't hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay, great.
Okay, so how would you respond to that?
I mean, it's a kind of a silly thing to say, talk about cosmetics and guns. Guns do make a difference. First of all, much as I think funding mental health adequately would be a good idea, it's not going to prevent these tragedies. Most of these people do not have a prior record of breakdowns. We can't institutionalize everybody with a mental illness in this country. And the young man that perpetrated these horrendous murders had evidence that he was odd, but no evidence of violence whatsoever. So that solution is not going to solve the problem. Secondly, coincidentally, there was and this is not the first time this has happened in China. The day before this terrible occurrence, somebody went into a classroom and attacked a bunch of school kids. He had a knife. A bunch of kids were stabbed. None of them died. It is ridiculous. And I say this as somebody who's been endorsed by the National Rifle Association many times. You do not need an assault weapon or a semi-automatic rifle to hunt a deer. This is ridiculous. And we do need to deal with these weapons. These weapons do not belong in the public hands, and we ought to do something about it. You are correct. This idea that you're going to pull the trigger and fire a single shot is absolutely not true. You pull the trigger and 30 or 40 or 50 or 100 shots go off. This is not necessary.
That's absolutely false, Governor. You don't know what you're talking about if you're saying that.
I certainly do know what I'm talking about.
Automatic weapons have been strictly regulated since 1934.
I've fired these guns before, and the semi-automatic does exactly the same thing. And I've fired those guns, and I know what I'm talking about.
That is just preposterous.
It's not preposterous.
By the way, it's also the opposite of what you said when the people of Vermont elected you as governor, and you were opposed to banning on these guns because you correctly at that time recognized that these are guns. When you press the trigger one time, you get one bullet. If it's different than that, then it's a machine gun under federal law, and that's been very severely regulated ever since 1934.
The National Rifle Association is out of control. The fact of the matter is you do not need a semi-automatic weapon to hunt a deer. And the fact of the matter is the NRA members up here are sane, thoughtful people who are mostly hunters, and they don't want their guns banned because they like hunting.
Hey,
I'm
Howard,
sympathetic with that.
Howard, the authorities, I mean, criminals are going to be able to get these things. The authorities need these, right? You just are saying that members of the public, you don't want any semi-automatic?
Let me tell you what happened in Australia. In Australia, they had 18 school shootings, I think, before 1981. They banned these things. They had a buyback, and they haven't had a big school shooting like this for, I think it's 18 years. So, look, this stuff works. I'm not looking to ban guns. I'm looking to have some common sense gun regulations that make some modicum of sense. And the idea that people, I heard an NRA guy one time from Washington say he had a right to have a bazooka in his house if he wanted to. That's insane.
David, one of the things that we've talked about on this set this morning is the idea of trying to use technology to solve some of these problems, including fingerprint technology, where you'd effectively lock a gun to a specific individual, and hopefully that they have been checked out when they registered for the gun in the first place. How do you feel about that?
Sure, and gun companies are trying to manufacture those because they could sell more guns to some customers who would like that. The problem is you can't mandate them, certainly not at this point, because with the existing state of the technology, they're not reliable enough. And that's why police officers who, like anybody else who has to have a gun for self-defense, absolutely refuse to have these things. It's, people have used fingerprint readers all the times in various applications, whether it's, say, booting up their portable computer or things like that. And people with experience in doing that know that sometimes those things don't work right away. So it's absolutely premature to think of mandating something like that.
Okay, we got to go, Howard. I just wanted to broach what some people say. Should principals be armed, Howard?
That's ridiculous. Well, why should principals of elementary schools have to carry guns around?
Because I just don't know if you can ever make sure that it's never going to happen, and you're just at the mercy of whoever is armed at that point.
Well, what we're talking about in this country is doing things that every other democracy does, which is having sane, sensible gun laws.
Doesn't Norway have those, though, Howard? And look at what there are 80 people. I don't know. A lot of places do. How many people were killed on that?
We're not going to eliminate these kinds of horrible events. The question is, can we reduce them dramatically? Right. And the fact of the matter is, a lot of people can go and get semi-automatics today that shouldn't have them.
Okay. All right, the governor got the last word. I don't know. We have to do that to the governor, David. He had, held a high public office.
That's okay.
Maybe we'll. Okay, we appreciate both of your time today. Thanks.